This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com. Well, we're moving on to talk about Dr. Death today. Of course, this past Friday would have been his birthday. He was born on May 14th, 1960. So that would have been his 61st birthday. Still a young man. Born in Lakewood, Colorado. He graduated Lakewood High School in 78. And of course, famously went to Oklahoma University. Here's a fun fact for you. Steve actually earned the name Dr. Death before he even graduated high school because he shattered his nose when he was wrestling, and he had to wrestle in an old school hockey goalie mask. So the nickname Dr. Death is legitimately from amateur wrestling. How about that?
Well, as a child, you learn that, you learn your doctorate skills, and then you learn your deathal skills, and he got both of them all at the same time, hence being Dr. Death. Yeah, no, man, Doc was a stud from day one. And coming out, I think he was wrestling and whooping people's ass. Probably slapped the doctor back after he got whacked in the ass that very first day on earth.
Of course, he's not just a wrestler. He was also a hell of an offensive lineman. He was one of the most recruited kids in the country before he winds up at Oklahoma. His brother was already there as a starting tight end. But at Oklahoma, he's going to both wrestle and play football. He becomes a 4-time All-American wrestler. He finished 6th as a freshman, 5th as a sophomore, 3rd as a junior, and 2nd as a senior after a defeat to future Olympic medalist Bruce Baumgartner. So no shame in losing to a Bruce around these parts, right?
Absolutely not. But, Doc was one of those guys, and he had a reputation, and look, I mean, reality in the wrestling business, you really didn't pay that much attention to the amateur wrestlers coming up unless there was somebody really making some noise. And I didn't hear of Doc until he actually came into the business, and then you kind of go back and learn all these things about him. But when you go back and learn and you talk to people who actually encountered Doc on the mat or on the football field, they always remembered because he was that much of a fucking stud athlete.
So let's talk about, and this is always fun to talk about sort of the beginnings of big star wrestlers. Before he comes in, he's in the 80 Orange Bowl. He's in the 81 Sun Bowl. He's drafted by the New Jersey Generals in the USFL draft in 83. But before he gets drafted to play pro ball, he's already training to be a professional wrestler with Cowboy Bill Watts and Buddy Landell, and he debuts in 82. So I know it's a different time, but back then, especially in the Watts territory, and we've all heard this through JR's commentary for decades now, you really gravitated towards quote unquote real athletes, right? Vern Gagne, Bill Watts, they wanted to know, where'd you play sports? Where'd you go to college, et cetera, right?
Sure, because you wanted the real deal, and you wanted someone who could protect the business inside and out. And when you have a legitimate pedigree and a legitimate background to point to, then it's hard for people to come back and say, oh yeah, he's in that fake wrestling bullshit. It's like, okay, hey man, you want to see fake? Let me show you fake. And you have that real pedigree, and you have that athleticism to put someone in their place if need be. And it was all entertainment then, it's all entertainment now, and it was just a different way of going about the business. And it was like, hey, look at who we've got from a fan perspective. And when I say a fan perspective, I'll use my perspective, even growing up as a kid, with the exception of Dory Funk Jr. and West Texas State University, because that's where the Funks went. So who wouldn't want to go there? And for someone who said something on Twitter or something, it's not ven por ellas, ven por ella, ven por ella, come and get it. But you didn't, I think that there was a feeling sometimes, hey, this guy came from the NFL. And when you would actually have conversations with people around you at the wrestling matches as a kid growing up, I remember people feeling that if someone came from the NFL, that sometimes there was a feeling, with few exceptions, Wahoo McDaniel, Ernie Ladd, Dr. Death is a really good exception. But the feeling was they couldn't make it in football, so they came to wrestling.
Right.
And that was just real talk. I always remember as a kid being in the audience with just, fans around us. Oh, he couldn't make it in the NFL, so he came here. Not knowing, Wahoo McDaniel came into wrestling for the money. The money was better than the NFL. Ernie Ladd, the same thing. So it depends. It differs at times, but there's been some truly great football players that have come through and excelled. Maybe it was an injury. Maybe it was something else. But the perception was, hey, this guy's this. When you're telling me how great he was at football, you're telling me, well, maybe he's not so great at wrestling.
Right.
So it's a double-edged sword, and I always kind of poo-pooed the accolades a lot of times of people coming in with those kind of credentials.
It's been said that Bill Watts really wanted Steve to be like his personal protege. Do you think there's any similarities between the two?
Sure. I think that, Doc going to the University of Oklahoma and Watts also coming up, playing football in college, and Watts was a stud. Watts was a hell of an athlete back in the day and got into professional wrestling through Leroy McGurk and those guys, good Lord, Luthez and what have you. But Watts, I think, saw a little bit of himself in Dr. Death and just wanted to exploit that as best he could.
Did you see any of his matches on TV before you met him in person?
Unfortunately, yeah.
So you were watching Watts TV even while you worked for Paul Bosch?
Yeah.
What was the relationship like with Houston wrestling and Mid-South wrestling, or Paul and Bill? What was it like here in early 80s?
In the very early 80s at this time, it really wasn't that much. And I'll tell you how I got to see it and why I got to see it, because we ran Beaumont, Texas, which was right on the Louisiana border. Beaumont would get television from Lake Charles, Louisiana. In Lake Charles, Louisiana, they had the Mid-South show. So you would get people in Beaumont asking us, hey, when y'all gonna bring Junkyard Dog in? When y'all gonna bring Ted DiBiase in? And they didn't understand this was two different booking offices and so on and so forth. They saw the Houston Wrestling Show, which was available on cable, but locally, they also saw Lake Charles TV as well. So I would get, even back then, I would get tapes and I would take a look at, what was going on with that television show in Louisiana. And you saw Dr. Death, you saw JYD and people like that.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.